Cuphead has gained a reputation for being one of the most difficult platformers in modern gaming, requiring extreme game knowledge, trial and error, and precision in order to pass its most difficult levels and bosses. But what if we went a step beyond just beating the game? What if we truly mastered Cuphead? What if we created the perfect run? Well, in today's video, we're gonna do just that. I decided that I would beat Cuphead without getting hit. I would start a new file and play through all 19 bosses in the main game of Cuphead. And if I got hit even once during any of those fights, I would be forced to completely delete my file and restart from the Kettle's house. This has been one of, if not the most difficult challenge that I've ever attempted. So, let me take you through my journey to answer the question, is it possible to beat Cuphead without getting hit? I hope you enjoy. I'm going to be structuring this video so that even if you've never played Cuphead before, you'll still be able to understand what's going on, as Cuphead isn't the primary focus on my channel. However, even if you're an experienced Cuphead veteran with a 300% save file, I've cooked up some new strategies and tips for some of the hardest bosses in this challenge that I've discovered while exploring the AI of this game. So stick around and I'm sure you'll learn something new. The rules for this challenge are quite simple. If we take any form of damage at any point in the game, I will be forced to immediately quit out and delete my save file. Additionally, we won't be entering the DLC in this challenge, so items from the DLC are also banned, so no Miss Chalice and none of the DLC ammo types. With that said, the first question to answer is how we're going to be routing this playthrough. Cuphead has 3 main worlds that we have to fight through, with worlds 1 and 2 containing 5 bosses each, and world 3 containing 7. There's also an extension to world 3, labeled Inkwell Hell, which houses the 2 final bosses for the game. To progress through a world onto the next one, you'll be required to defeat every single boss in that world. Accompanying the bosses, there are 2 run and gun levels present in every single world. Unlike the bosses, these are not required, but can give you coins to buy different weapons and charms. For our route, our first objective is to get 15 coins as soon as possible before we leave World 1. Doesn't that sound familiar? This will allow us to unlock the best possible weapons for the remainder of the playthrough. Once we're on the world map for World 1, the first thing we do is run up this apple guy for 3 coins. With these 3 coins, we can buy the smoke bomb. The smoke bomb is quite possibly the most useful item in this run, changing our dash mechanic to a teleport, allowing us to dash through enemy attacks and projectiles. But with just our smoke bomb, we're not quite ready to take on any bosses just yet. We might have a good way of evading attacks, but our damage output still isn't great. So we head into the first run and gun level, Forest Follies. Each run and gun level houses 5 coins that you can collect. Luckily, these aren't some Donkey Kong 64 collectibles, they're usually in plain sight and pretty hard to miss. So with the smoke bomb, it's pretty easy to blaze through this level while nabbing every single coin. Considering this is the first level in the no-hit run, I had a ton of experience in this level near the end of this challenge. So I pretty much had the entire level memorized and could speed through it without ever taking damage. The only tip that I can really give here is to abuse the smoke bomb as much as possible. Enemies that you can't one-shot with your pea shooter, you can skip with the smoke bomb. We want to be cautious during this no-hit run, but we also want to be fast, as we're going to be restarting constantly. So the faster that we can get at the beginning portions of the game, the more time we'll save for later and significantly harder worlds. Once we exit Forest Follies, we can spend our newly earned 5 coins on the spread shot. The spread shot functions like your typical video game shotgun would, firing 5 pellets for a shot with limited range. At close range, this shot deals the highest damage per second in the entire game, clocking in at 41.33. Due to being, well, a spread shot, it also fires in a wide pattern, allowing for good coverage when defending from weaker enemies. And this becomes extremely useful in our next level, Treetop Trouble. We don't quite have enough coins for our ideal setup, but we can buy another weapon after completing this level. Luckily, this level isn't too much harder than Forest Follies. Normally, these bouncing beetles and woodpeckers can create some uncomfortable timings, but with the smoke bomb, we can dash right through the woodpeckers. The next section can be much more challenging. I've lost many runs to these little beetle enemies. Oh, I didn't put spread on. Oh, I guess we're doing this without spread then. And then we're just gonna hit. I'm starting to get a little... However, they'll always spawn in the exact same place every time. By switching between the spread shot and pea shooter and carefully aiming your shots, ascending the tree shouldn't be too difficult. The platforming section is the easiest part of this level in my opinion. The only somewhat challenging area is the last coin. But by simply waiting on each leaf for a bit before jumping to the next one, the wood platform will always perfectly line up for you to land on it as you collect the coin. Now we have to deal with the dragonfly. This boss is super annoying to play normally. Luckily, we don't have to. By standing on the top right platform, then jumping at the very edge, you can completely skip the dragonfly boss. You can even do this mini boss skip without the smoke bomb with a bit tighter timing. This saves loads of time, and it's just way easier than fighting the boss normally. With treetop trouble gone, we've cleared the only 2 run and guns that we need for this entire run. Now we have enough coins to head back to Pork Rind Shop and pick up the roundabout. Roundabout is essentially just a better pea shooter, outclassing it in both DPS and utility. With our setup mostly complete, we now have to figure out what order we're going to fight the bosses in. Generally, we want to follow these rules. You always want to do bosses that are more difficult earlier in the run, because logically it's going to save a ton of time overall. For example, let's say we have a hypothetical run of 2 bosses, Goopy Legrand and the Devil. We'd always want to fight the Devil first, because we're going to be losing more often on the Devil. So it's better that we lose earlier on, so we don't waste 50 seconds kicking Goopy's shit in every single run just to get another chance at the Devil. Unfortunately, as with most games, Cuphead's bosses get more difficult as the game goes on. But within each world, we can have some variety in who we fight. However, some bosses are locked behind other bosses. In World 1, the boss tree looks like this, with Cagney Carnation, Goopy Legrand, and the Root Pack being your first choices. Out of all of the World 1 bosses, I found Ribian Croaks and Cagney Carnation to be the hardest bosses. So we'll go in this order, starting with Cagney Carnation. Cagney Carnation is the reason that we picked up the roundabout shot over the lobber. He sits at a really weird height in this fight relative to Cuphead, so using the pea shooter won't really get you optimal damage, and using the spread shot puts you in a pretty uncomfortable position. But with roundabout, you'll hit almost every shot from anywhere in the arena. For Cagney himself, he only really has one threatening attack, when he spawns seeds that grow into piranha plants. It's really important that whenever you notice Cagney doing this attack, try to parry the pink seed. If you don't, the pink seed will turn to a separate enemy that can only be hit when it drops its guard to attack you. This will clutter up the arena until you get rid of it. Also, note that you can crouch under Cagney's boomerang shots, allowing you to get slightly more damage than if you were to jump over them. As long as you can manage Cagney's seed attacks, his first phase isn't too difficult. In Cagney's second phase, he completely covers the bottom portion of the arena, forcing you to remain on the 3 floating platforms. Normally, you would need to platform around Cagney's vines while he shoots pollen at you, but we have a more efficient way of doing this. Watch the pattern that Cagney's pollen follows. Notice how at the very start of the attack, the pollen is slightly higher than the platform. This gives you just enough room to crouch under the pollen while blasting Cagney with your spread shot pause. If a vine happens to spawn on your platform, you can jump, then use an EX move to stay in the air and stall out the vine. Then you can land back on the platform and continue using the spread shot while crouched. This will save loads of time over fighting Cagney normally, and is a bit easier overall. With Cagney down, the next hardest boss in the order is Ribian Croaks, but in order to get to Ribian Croaks, we first need to take out the Root Pack. The Root Pack is ultra free, so the only challenge in this boss comes in trying to get through it as fast as possible to not waste any time. The first phase of the fight is completely scripted. Sal's Sputter here will always shoot the exact same pattern of projectiles every time the fight is reset. So I just walk up to him, lay down spread shots while timing my jumps, and he usually goes down after he finishes firing his second volley. Ollie Ball was next. We don't want to activate the secret phase here because it's way harder than the normal route. So the moment the onion spawns, just spam spread shots. If you want a little extra DPS, you can shoot a roundabout EX, then switch back to the spread shots while dodging the boomerang. I can't pronounce the carrot's name, but like Sal's Sputter, he's completely scripted. Just spam spread shots while jumping to deal as much damage as you can, making sure to take out all of the smaller carrots that he spawns. When he goes for the I-beam attack, switch to roundabout and dash to either side of him to bait the shot. With that, the Root Pack is down and we can unlock the hardest boss in World 1 in my opinion. Though Ribian Croaks are the hardest boss in World 1, they aren't too difficult overall. Their first 2 phases are relatively free. During the first phase, walk up and start laying down spread shots. Ribian Croaks will randomly choose which one of them goes first. If it's Croaks, he'll spit out these fly enemies that will slowly close in on you unless you take care of them. If it's Ribby, he'll begin to hurl fist projectiles at you in a pyramid-like pattern. If Croaks is first, camp right next to the two and spam spread shots. Personally, I like to use the lock-on feature here to snap around and deal with any flies when they get too close. When Ribby attacks, switch off to roundabout. When he throws his punches, you only need to jump over the first one. So simply jump the first one, crouch, then jump the last one. Once you've dealt enough damage during the first phase to have 3 to 4 super cards, run up and spam your roundabout EX. Ribby and Croaks actually have 2 separate hitboxes, so the roundabout will hit for all 8 of its possible attacks instantly. Phase 2 is pretty simple. Roundabout works perfectly here, as you'll always be hitting Ribby or Croaks no matter what. Though it's important that you don't jump when trying to dodge Ribby's projectiles, it'll just throw you off. Use the wind from Croaks and it should be pretty easy to dodge under. Now, the third phase of this fight is what actually makes me rank Ribby and Croaks as the hardest boss in World 1. This phase is based all around RNG. I mean, figures, it's a literal slot machine. Basically, in order to damage Ribby and Croaks, you'll have to roll the slot machine. From here, you can get 3 attacks: bulls, snakes, or what we really don't want, leopards. Bulls and snakes are pretty easy, but leopards can be pretty challenging. With how precise you have to be in order to dodge the bouncing balls, it's pretty easy to mess up, especially near the end of the attack when you aren't given much room to dodge. Unfortunately, you'll always have to survive 1.5 attacks from this slot machine no matter what strategy you're doing. If you've played this boss enough, you've probably tried to spam as much damage as you can during the transition to phase 3. I mean, it seems to work for other bosses, so what gives? What gives is that Ribby and Croaks actually have a period of invincibility during the transition into the slot machine. Until the phase transitions, Ribby and Croaks cannot go below 557 HP, even though they flash like they're taking damage, so you'll always have to fight the slot machine in full. If you don't get leopards, this fight is pretty easy, and even with leopards, it's still manageable when you compare it to any boss outside of World 1. With Ribby and Croaks down, we just have to clean up some of the more consistent bosses in World 1. Goopy Legrand is next and is debatably the easiest boss in the entire game. I don't really have any cool or interesting strategies to talk about with Goopy. Use roundabout whenever he's far away, and crouch and use spread shot whenever he does a punch or a sneeze. For the last phase, you can abuse the fact that Goopy is a background boss. Background bosses have a hitbox that doesn't do contact damage, so just jump up and spam your spread shot EX to hit all 8 of the attacks. Just make sure not to get too greedy. I have a confession to make. I really did take a hit on Goopy during the first stream of this challenge. Dash. Dash. What the again? Are you kidding me again? Really? With Goopy down, we only have one boss left in World 1, and that's Hildeberg. Hildeberg is our first of the 5 plain bosses. Throughout the run, the plain bosses generally tend to be more challenging than the strict platformer bosses. But for me, Hildeberg is one of the most consistent bosses in the game. Hildeberg has 6 different phases, with 7 total phases possible, making her far and away the most complicated boss in World 1. Though she is pretty simple to deal with. In her first phase, the only direct attack she has is laughing at you. As long as you're ready to react to this, it isn't a problem. Her second phase will always be the constellation of Taurus. Similar to the first phase, the only attack she has is to directly charge at you. You can always tell when this is about to happen because she'll briefly stop moving before charging. Also, note that Hildeberg will always have to end this phase with a charge attack, so stay on your toes. Her third phase is the exact same as the first, so not much to go over here. However, the next phase can actually vary from attempt to attempt. Hildeberg will either transform into Gemini or Sagittarius. Sagittarius will shoot arrows on regular intervals. If you just move in a circle pattern around the projectiles that he shoots, he kinda just falls apart and is pretty free. Gemini can sometimes trip players up though. They'll spawn a projectile in the center of the arena, which will then shoot a beam of light in a circular pattern. You might think that this can be pretty unfair and sometimes just spawn on top of you, but it can actually only spawn on the Y-axis, choosing a random direction between up and down. Once it spawns in, it'll rotate in whatever direction is closest to the player. As long as you camp this projectile horizontally, you'll always have enough time to react to it. Once you get past Hildeberg's last normal phase, she'll turn into a giant moon for her final phase. Note that like Ribby and Croaks, Hildeberg cannot be damaged during her transition into the moon, so don't go wasting your nukes on this transition. However, it is important that you build as much super meter as you can for this phase. Throughout all of the plane bosses, managing your EXs properly is extremely important. The normal plane EX, which I'm going to call the Chomper, will do more damage based on how much horizontal distance the boss takes up, so it's good to know when and when not to use it. For example, in Hildeberg's first phase, her hitbox is relatively small compared to future phases. So it would be a waste to use the Chomper now. It's better to just save up all 5 cards for a nuke. But in this phase, she takes up the entire screen. Because she has so much horizontal coverage, the Chompers can deal tons of damage and hit many times before going off screen. So you're going to want to spam these throughout the entirety of the last phase. As for Hildeberg's actual attacks, she'll spawn 2 different types of UFOs. The brown UFOs try to predict the player's movement, and the red ones are reaction-based. The best way I've found to deal with these is to bait the brown ones into attacking, then stay behind them, and to shrink and dash past the red ones. A few chompers later, Hildeberg, and now all of World 1, is now complete. Congratulations, you've now completed the tutorial of Cuphead. You really haven't seen anything yet. Everything past this world will only get more and more difficult. Compared to the rest of the game, World 1 really does feel like a tutorial. But before we move on, there is an item that we have to pick up. Something very, very important. After exiting Hildeberg, you'll see that we only have 2 coins. Remember, earlier I said that we want to have 15 coins before we leave World 1. Well, we can get those last 2 coins now. This coin guy here, honestly I couldn't find his name. If anyone could tell me in the comments, that would be great. He hides hidden coins around the map, one in each world specifically. The one in World 1 requires this NPC to get out of the way, which he will do once you've defeated every boss in the world. Now we run all the way back to the tutorial and get the coin from there. The only reason that I didn't do this earlier when I immediately started the game was because of the logical time save that I mentioned earlier. If we're doing this at the start of every single run and fail in World 1, it's gonna waste a lot more time overall than just doing it at the end of World 1. But I still have the most fails here just because it's at the beginning of the run. So by getting this coin now, we save a ton of time. After we pick up this coin, we get my favorite weapon in the entire game. Let me introduce you to the Charge Shot. I believe that the Charge Shot is without a doubt the best weapon in the entire game, with a DPS second to only spread, insanely good range, and charge-specific strategies for loads of different bosses. This weapon has so much utility across the entire game, and we'll be using it for every single boss fight going forward. With our loadout for the game set, we can move on to World 2, where the game can truly begin. Like World 1, World 2 houses 5 bosses, but unlike World 1, 4 of these bosses are quite difficult. This is what the boss tree looks like for World 2. But we can't follow it exactly like we did in World 1. Our first goal in this world is to get to the Mausoleum to pick up the Super Art 2, because the optimal strategies for 2 of the bosses both require it. But we're still going to follow the rule of fighting harder bosses first. So I decided to go with this order. We'll fight Jimmy the Great first, then take out Baroness and Wally to unlock the Super Art 2. Then we can finish out the rest of the world with Beppy and Grimm. Make sure that before you enter Jimmy's arena, you pick up the bombs from the NPC. With our order set, we can move on to the first boss in World 2, Jimmy the Great. Jimmy the Great was one of the bosses that gave me the most trouble in the early days of this challenge. What are we getting? Treasure! Ah, you bitch. Ah! But after researching how he works for my World 2 AI breakdown, I found some strategies that made him a lot easier. When the fight starts, Jimmy can do one of 3 attacks. These are swords, cats, and treasure. Similar to Ribby and Croaks, 2 of these attacks are completely free, with the only concerning attack being the treasure. Treasure made up almost all of Jimmy's difficulty during this challenge, but one simple discovery made this attack much easier. When Jimmy starts by opening his box, he'll shoot out his skull from his head, but he can actually only do this once. He'll never actually roll another attack, it just keeps going until you do enough damage to go into the next phase. Originally, I thought that he would keep shooting his skull at the player on regular intervals, so I'd restrict myself to the bottom portion of the arena, which would lead to me not having much space and often end with me getting hit. But because he only shoots his skull once, you can simply move up once he shoots it and dodge the treasure with relative ease. Once you get through the pillar section and onto phase 3, you're going to want to use your nuke here. It can be really easy for Jimmy to clutter up the arena during this phase, and we definitely don't want that. The nuke should skip the majority of this phase. Jimmy should only be able to get about 2 to 3 attacks in. We do not want to activate the secret phase here, as it is way harder than the normal route. For the Cuphead phase, take note of the pattern that the Cuphead shoots. Every 4th bullet will always be a parryable shot. Use this to your advantage and build up a full super meter, but don't use it yet. There are some other strategies with Cuphead, like going under his arm and staying super close, but I was never able to pull these off consistently. Once you defeat Cuphead and you're onto the final phase of this fight, position yourself in line with Jimmy's bottom jaw. Now, wait until he shoots a ring and use your nuke to invincibility frame through it. This last phase is the hardest part of the fight normally, but this strategy completely skips it. The strategy improvements for the treasure in last phase made what was probably the hardest boss in World 2 one of the easier bosses in the world and honestly in this whole game. With Jimmy down, we can move on to Baroness von Bonbon for the Path to the Invincibility super art. Baroness von Bonbon is the easiest boss in World 2 in my opinion. This boss is unique in that the phases are never set in stone like other bosses. Instead, there are 5 possible enemies for the first 3 phases. These can be in any order and it's completely random which mini-boss is in which phase. With Baroness herself and her cream pup, yes that is the name of the castle she's on top of, chasing you in the last phase. This boss really shows how broken our charge shot is. 4 out of the 5 mini-bosses can be completely obliterated in 4 to 5 charge shots. The only issue with this fight comes when the muffin pulls up. If he appears in the first or second phase, it isn't really a big deal. We can just keep using the charge shot as normal. But when he appears in the 3rd phase, this becomes an issue. The only weakness of the charge shot is that it really sucks at crowd control. With this game being based more around boss fights and not traditional platforming run and gun levels, this isn't really a huge issue for most of the game, but here it can be. In order to make the phases more challenging as the fight goes on, other enemies and threats will be added to the arena as the fight progresses. Starting in phase 2 with these smaller jellybean enemies, then Baroness herself using a shotgun to fire at the player. Dodging all of these attacks with charge is a bit risky, so for the secondary in this fight, bring the roundabout shot. We choose roundabout over spread here because of the absolutely stupid range on the muffin's lingering hitbox. Whenever he spawns in, dash to whatever side that he's not at. Crouch and then camp with the roundabout. Roundabout will always take out the jellybean enemies before they have a chance to damage you, even if you're camping at the right side of the arena. Also, note that shooting Baroness during the 3rd mini-boss when she appears to shoot her shotgun will not actually do any damage to the boss. This is just simply a dead hitbox. Once you've defeated the last of Baroness's mini-bosses, she'll appear at the top of the castle. From here, you want to jump up, shoot a charge shot, then use the charge EX and repeat. You can get 2 to 3 of these in before Baroness fully transforms, giving you an insane lead on the last phase. Note that the contact damage hitbox for the castle doesn't actually exist until Baroness is fully transformed. So feel free to get as close as you want until the phase actually begins. Now, just a few charge shots later, and you should be able to take out Baroness before she even has a chance to clutter up the arena. Though this boss is pretty easy, I do want to add, during the winning run of this challenge, look at how close this was to getting hit. This is like literal pixels away from damage. Wally Warbles is next in our order and is the second plane boss in World 2. Wally's first phase is pretty straightforward. Just camp the left edge of the screen and you'll never take any damage from the eggshells as long as they don't directly hit you. Wally's second phase may look intimidating, but it really isn't that hard once you focus on what feathers are actually close to you. At least, it isn't as bad as some later bosses. At this point in the fight, you've probably built up enough super cards for a nuke, but you don't want to use that nuke yet until you've reached the 3rd phase. In Wally's 3rd phase, he's replaced by a much smaller bird, who's actually his son, named Willy Warbles. Willy Warbles is who we saved our nuke for. Willy and then Wally's last phase are the parts of this fight that trip players up the most, but we have a strategy for both. Willy Warbles is actually a completely scripted phase. You can see here I've layered 2 separate fights with Willy on top of one another. Willy and his egg movement will always be the exact same every single fight. Willy will also always shoot a parryable shot at the exact same time every single fight. It's really important that we hit all of these parries in this phase, as having a full super for the next phase is essential for removing RNG. Now, here's how you can get past Willy no hit every single time. When the phase first starts, use your nuke and move to the right side of the screen. Willy will move in a banana-like pattern, so duck under him and move to the left. Once you're to the left of him, he should be about ready to shoot his first bullet. Parry it and go back to the right side of the arena when he goes up the next time. Now you'll have to parry a second bullet from behind. After parrying the second bullet, go through Willy's eggs back to the left side of the screen. He'll then shoot one more bullet as he gets closer to you. Once you parry this bullet, go inside of his circle of eggs and deal as much damage as you can. Once you've finished off Willy, the last and most RNG based part of this fight begins. Basically, there are two variables when this phase first starts. These variables are what side Wally's going to move to and what attack he's going to do. Wally can either spit up trash or spit out his heart to start, and he'll always alternate between these two attacks. We can draw a Punnett square to see all of the cases for this phase, but what we're really concerned about here is the vomit attack. Depending on what side Wally decides to move to while doing this attack, we're going to have to react differently. Throughout the entire phase, you always want to be on the bottom of the arena using your normal shot, as using bombs makes you more of a target for the nurse birds. If Wally moves right during the spit up attack, just dodge as you normally would and continue attacking. If he moves left, use your nuke to pass through Wally and go to the opposite side of the arena. You see, normally if Wally would do a spit attack and start moving left, you're pretty much screwed unless you get lucky with Nurse Bird RNG, or you're just cracked and can do some super precise dodging. So by nuking through Wally on the bottom, we can eliminate all of Wally's RNG in this phase. Just make sure not to get clipped by the Nurse Birds when you're making your way back to the left side. Oh, okay, barely got that. With that, Wally Warbles is down, and we can pick up our Invincibility Super Art from the Mausoleum. You might be wondering why we didn't pick up the first Super Art in World 1 if we're picking up Invincibility now. And that's because the first Super Art sucks. It might look really cool, but Super Art 2 outclasses it in every way. Let me explain. See, Super Art 1 only actually does 87 damage on a hit. Now, that might just seem like a random number, as we don't really have anything to compare it to. Well, a fully charged shot does 46 damage. So 2 charged shots will do more damage than a full Super 1. But it gets worse. I went into the Root Pack's boss fight to see how much damage each of the ammo types could do within a period of invincibility. Using the spread shot, I managed to do 168 damage within the super. With the charged shot, I did 184. With roundabout, I did 145, and even with the base pea shooter, I did 136. So even with the base pea shooter, you're still doing 1.56 times the amount of damage that you'd get from Super 1. On top of that, Super 2 is situationally way more useful. Using Super 1 can leave you in a disadvantaged state if there happens to be projectiles right near you, as you can't act immediately once the super ends. But with the invincibility, you can carefully position yourself so that you're in the clear once the invincibility runs out. Super 2 will be used throughout the rest of the run, with some bosses having strategies that use it to skip phases, like our next boss, Beppy the Clown. We're going to want the iconic duo of Spread and Charge going into this fight. Beppy the Clown is the first time that we see a lot of strategies that are very important for the later half of this run, and the first one is phase manipulation. The charge shot has a hidden bonus when compared to any other weapon type, and it's that you can use charge shots to measure out boss health. Beppy's first phase will always last 6 charge shots, and we want to spend as little time in Beppy's second phase as possible, as it's the most RNG based phase in this fight. So fire 5 charge shots at Beppy, then wait until he dashes to the other side of the arena. In order to transition into the next phase, Beppy must hit the wall of the arena. Once he hits the opposite side, pelt him with as many charge shots as you can. This will get you more damage into phase 2, so we'll have to spend less time overall in that phase. Phase 2 is the worst part of this fight. On each of these pipe openings, Beppy will spawn balloon dogs. If a run were to end here, it would be because of the arena just getting too crowded, or because a balloon dog spawned on top of me. That was pure luck. I don't know how I small managed that. Try your best to use the spread shot's crowd control abilities to take care of the balloon dogs while damaging Beppy. Luckily, once this phase is over, the rest of the fight is completely free. He got sniped. When the third phase begins, Beppy is going to go to either side of the arena on his Charlie horse. Wherever he goes, charge a charge shot, then immediately switch off to spread to pelt him with as much damage as possible. If the Charlie horse is green, you should be able to end this phase before he has a chance to attack again. If it was yellow, he'll probably be about 1 to 2 charge shots away from the next phase. Just dodge the horseshoes while on the coaster and he should go down. The last phase is where our invincibility comes in. If you know anything about this phase, it's that it gets extremely hectic and crowded really fast. After the roller coaster runs through the first time, Beppy will spawn a bunch of penguins that throw baseballs at Cuphead. But if we can do enough damage fast enough, we won't have to deal with them. Start the phase with a charge shot, then switch to spread. Do as much damage to Beppy with the spread shot as you can. Abuse the fact that he's a background boss in this phase. Then, right as the penguins are about to start attacking, pop your invincibility to finish the fight without ever having to deal with the penguins. Congratulations! Defeating Beppy means that you're officially halfway through the no-hit run. But we're just getting started. Unfortunately, the second half of this run contains 6 bosses that are far and away the hardest bosses in the main game. Let me introduce you to the Gauntlet. The Gauntlet is the entire reason why this challenge is as hard as it is, as you don't even really get to the hard part of the game until after you've defeated half of the bosses. Every boss that's in the Gauntlet is much more difficult than every boss outside of it, and aside from the devil, we're all responsible for at least one fail throughout this challenge. So for the second half of the game, we're going to want to take out as many of the bosses in the Gauntlet as early as possible. Unfortunately, the layout of Cuphead's map and the fact that the devil is the last boss in the game doesn't really make this possible, but we'll adjust accordingly. Our first member of the Gauntlet and our last boss in World 2 is Grim Matchstick, so we'll go to him first. When I first started this challenge, Grim Matchstick was one of the most challenging bosses in the run for me. Originally, I had him placed at number 2 in the Gauntlet, second to only Rimmer Honeybottoms. But after I researched his AI, I was able to find some strategies that make him a bit easier, which is why he's currently ranked at number 4. The first strategy comes in the first phase. In Grim's first phase, he'll shoot I-beam projectiles at you and breathe fire. What makes this phase a bit tricky sometimes is Grim's tail attack, as it sections off the arena, and seeing as you don't have a consistent platform to stand on, this can become a problem very quickly.
Oh, you can see it from the bottom, it looks like a door! Stop!
That was dumb. But you can actually control when and where Grim does this tail attack. You might think that Grim just randomly starts the tail attack once you've been in the phase for a while, but this actually isn't true. Grim's first tail attack is triggered by going under a certain damage threshold. Whenever Grim's HP is less than or equal to 1392, the tail attack will instantly spawn on Cuphead's position. We can use the measuring bonus of charge shots to keep track of this. When firing charge shots at Grim, your 7th charge shot will always push Grim under 1392 HP. So when the fight starts, begin counting your charge shots. Then move to the left side of the arena to shoot the 7th charge shot. And with consistent enough DPS, he'll only be able to do this attack one more time until you've cleared the phase. But we still aren't done with phase manipulation in this fight. Grim's entire first phase takes 13 charge shots before he transitions. Once you've shot 13 charge shots, wait until Grim starts a fire breath attack. This animation is much longer than the I-beam attack, and it will allow you to get much more damage into the second phase. Grim's second phase is a test on how good your prediction and aim abilities are. You're always going to want to angle your charge shots at a bottom left diagonal angle in order to hit Grim as much as possible. When an imp jumps up at you, get as high as you can within the arena and jump up without moving or dashing. Don't commit to any actions until you're absolutely sure the imp won't reach you. If you've played the last phase well and keep up the DPS, you might not even get any imp attacks with good enough luck. Regardless, it's extremely important that you keep the DPS up when Grim is transitioning into his final phase. Grim's final phase is one of the most hated phases in the entire game. Luckily, we have a strategy to counter it. Once the transition starts, Grimm's hitboxes get a little weird. He loses the hitbox on his body, and the one that was on his head is pushed forward. So you're gonna have to aim super low. I don't know if the way this hitbox works is intended by the developers, but regardless, hit this hitbox with as many charge shots as you can during the transition. Keep doing as much damage as you can until Grimm starts attacking in his last phase. Make sure not to hit any of these bubble attacks with your shots, as they'll split apart into 4 smaller fireballs. Now, run at Grimm, fire a charge shot, pop your invincibility, and switch to spread. Put as much damage as you can on Grimm before getting out of his contact hitbox. With this invincibility, we've pretty much skipped the first wave of bubble attacks. If he doesn't just die outright, Grimm should now be ready for his fire breath attack, which is really easy to dodge. Just stay pretty high in the arena and keep firing charge shots, and you should be able to take him out before the first fire breath attack is over. With that, we've taken out all of World 2, and one of the 6 members of the Gauntlet. From here on out, we're officially in the hard part of the run. Unlike Worlds 1 and 2, World 3 is a mixed bag in difficulty. I'd say that throughout World 1, every boss is pretty much free. In World 2, aside from Baroness, every boss is reasonably challenging. Now, in World 3, we have 3 bosses that are pretty easy, all things considered, with the rest of them being members of the Gauntlet. The boss tree for World 3 is pretty complicated, and because of the way the map is set up, splits up the Gauntlet so that we can't get it all out of the way immediately. However, we can get numbers 1 and 2 right away after entering the world. So, we start with Rumor Honeybottoms. Rumor Honeybottoms is in my opinion the hardest boss for the Cuphead no-hit challenge, placing number 1 in the Gauntlet. For me, Rumor was a literal brick wall during the first few streams of this challenge. On the second stream, I managed to get to Honeybottoms, beating the previous PB of Grimm by 1 boss. Then, for the next 5 streams, my runs would always end here. This boss was a mental block that I really just could not break. But what makes Rumor Honeybottoms so difficult? All of the difficulty in this fight comes in the second phase. The first phase is completely free. Just shoot the police bee with 6 charge shots and he goes down no problem. Once the second phase starts, Rumor can choose between 3 attacks. She can either spawn a homing circle that tracks the player, a pink triangle that spawns at the player's position and shoots smaller triangles from each of its vertices, or she can spit ricocheting bullets from the middle. The circle attack is completely free, and we don't really have to worry about this one. The other 2 attacks, however, are where the problems come in. Let's first talk about the middle attack, when Rumor begins to spit bullets. This attack can either be extremely easy to dodge or extremely difficult, and it's all dependent on platform RNG. You see, when Rumor spawns in the middle of the arena, she's basically sectioned you off to whatever side you were on when she started the attack. You can cross over, but it's extremely risky and disorienting. Now, if you were on the lucky side of the arena, you'll have a set of platforms that will nicely spawn on the edge of the arena, where you can simply drop through, duck, or jump under the bullets. But if you were on the unlucky side of the arena, the platforms would line up so that the bullets would always cover them perfectly, making this attack a lot more hectic and panic-inducing. Or you could just get some stupid bullshit like this.
What? What?
But most of the time, it wasn't the bullet attack that was the problem. It was the pink triangles. For whatever reason, I just could not comprehend this shape. With the fact that the screen is moving upwards because the arena is an auto-scroller, the large triangle is moving in a direction, it's rotating, and there's smaller triangles being shot out of the larger triangle constantly, all of these different directions and projectiles would just confuse my prediction abilities, and I would make the stupidest mistakes ever whenever Rumor would spawn one of these in. Eventually, I did find a strategy that would make the triangles a bit easier. You see, with Rumor's other magic attack, she just spawns it in front of her and then it tracks you, but the triangles will spawn on Cuphead's position. If we're in the center of the arena when the triangle spawns, it'll give us much less room to move around. So whenever Rumor is about to use a magic attack, go to one of the top corners of the arena and jump up. That way, the triangle spawns as far away from the center of the arena as possible, giving you more time to react to its movements. The third phase of this fight is even worse than the second. Luckily, Rumor Honeybottoms has the single most useful instance of phase manipulation. When Rumor starts an attack, she has to commit to it fully and can't end it midway through to change phases. You know what that means. Rumor's second phase will last 10 charge shots. So shoot 9 charge shots, finish out whatever attack you're currently on, wait for Rumor to start the next attack, Then do as much damage as you possibly can. If done properly, this will skip the entirety of the third phase, or leave it very weakened, in which case you can just finish off Rumor with your invincibility super and a few charge shots. With Rumor down, we've taken out the first place of the gauntlet, but directly afterwards we have to deal with the second in command, and that's Dr. Cal's robot. Dr. Cal is pretty unique in that he's one of the only bosses that I haven't really found some cool new strategy for. You kinda just have to be good at the game and master the already established strategy. In the first phase, Dr. Cal has 3 pieces that you'll need to break, each one then transforming that third of Cal to do a different attack. There's a very specific sequence that you should follow in order for the most optimal first phase every time. The laser that the robot's head shoots is super annoying and takes up a ton of arena space, so when the fight first starts, head up and do as much damage as you can to it. When it's about to fire, head down and take care of the bottom projectiles that Cal shoots. If you don't destroy these, they can clutter up the arena and very quickly lead to a hit.
Get in line. Whoa, 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 dude. Those take a lot more damage than
Then go back up and destroy the head of the robot. With the head down, take out the bottom vent, then the centerpiece. Make sure that you always destroy the bombs immediately as they leave the broken vent. When the robot's heart appears, you may be tempted to nuke it. Don't. We're going to save our nuke for later in the fight as insurance. Once you've dealt with the intermission phase of Cal flying around the arena, it's time to lock in for the gem phase. This phase consists of Cal doing one simple attack, holding out a gem that spews smaller gems in every other direction. Cal has 2 gems that he can use in this phase, the red gem and the blue gem. The red gem is significantly harder than the blue gem, shooting 8 smaller gems per second, whereas the blue gem only shoots 6 and is easier to see. Depending on what gem Cal decides to start with, the fight can be much easier or much harder. If he starts with a blue gem, you should be able to dodge onto the first wall pretty easily. Then you can just use your nuke to get a head start into the phase. But if he happens to use the red gem first, it can be extremely difficult to dodge under the first wall. This is what we saved our nuke for. If it looks like you're going to be in a really tight situation and you aren't 100% confident you can dodge, nuke through the wall and position yourself more comfortably. Parry any gems that are close enough to build up super, and use nukes whenever available. Other than that, I don't really have much else to say other than just to get good. Dr. Cal is one of the most mechanically challenging bosses in the entire game, and with gem RNG I think is well deserving of the number 2 spot in the gauntlet. Once you've defeated Cal, you've knocked out the 2 hardest bosses in the game. The run from here is no cakewalk, but we're certainly over the hill of difficulty. The next boss in our order is Sally's stage play. Ideally, we'd fight some gauntlet bosses first, but Sally is required to get to our next gauntlet boss, the Phantom Express. So, for ease of time, we fight her now. The smoke bomb obliterates Sally in this fight. As long as you can gauge the distance for her attacks properly, the first phase shouldn't really be much of an issue. Sally's second phase is definitely the hardest phase in this fight, but it isn't too difficult compared to a gauntlet boss. If you ever feel the fight is getting too crowded, just pop an invincibility to get through this phase. Phase 3 might be one of the best uses of spread shot in the entire game. Sally makes herself a perfect target by just going AFK for most of this phase. Just stand under her and spam your spread shot to take care of this phase relatively quickly. The last phase can be a bit annoying, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue if you have decent aim. 4 charge shots should do the trick. Defeating Sally unlocks the path to the Phantom Express, our next gauntlet boss. The Phantom Express consists of 4 different phases, and knowing how to deal with each one's variability and RNG is crucial in not getting hit in this boss. Similar to Grim and Honeybottoms, the environmental challenge here is that we don't have a traditional arena to work with. Instead, we're given a railroad cart that can be moved from 3 different positions in the arena by parrying the sides, or enemies dropping parryable items on each side. Making sure the cart is always in a good position is crucial for surviving in this fight. In the first phase, keep the cart to the very left. You're going to want to bring the ammo types of Roundabout and Charge into this fight. Roundabout is useful here for clearing the eye projectiles that the Blind Spectre here shoots. If one of the pumpkins is about to move the cart, simply parry towards the left edge of the screen, and the cart won't move. The second phase of this fight puts you against the conductor of the express. In my opinion, this is the most difficult part of the fight. At least, it's the only part that I lost any runs to. One of my worst fails ever doing this challenge was being so nervous and shaky after PBing to Phantom Express that I actually pressed the B button to pop my invincibility too fast and lost to the conductor.
Okay. I'm gonna watch that back. I really want to watch that back. 9:48, damn. I really want to watch that back because I pressed B to start my invincibility. I know for sure I pressed B to start my invincibility there.
With nerves, the conductor can be really annoying. Basically, his head will spawn on one of the 3 locations, with the other 2 locations being occupied by his skeleton hands. These will then slam down and the cycle will repeat with another random head position. I always tried to never move the cart whenever I could, instead moving to each end of the cart to barely miss the hitboxes. Honestly, jumping to parry the cart always seemed too risky and also seemed super slow, but this led to some unfortunate situations where an enemy would just move the cart and I really couldn't do anything about it. Luckily, the last 2 phases are pretty simple. The twins are next and they don't really do much. Just camp one side of the arena and neither of them will be able to hit you with their lightning attack if you're as close to the edge as possible. A few charge shots each and they'll both go down. Once you reach the last phase, lock in because it's time to aim. Basically, the train can only take damage after you parry its tail to open its engine. Then you can damage it. It takes 5 charge shots to fully defeat the train. So if you still have your invincibility, pop it when you parry the tail and take as much time as you need to carefully aim your shots. With enough practice, you should always be able to one-cycle this fight. After Phantom Express, we only have 2 members of the gauntlet left. We do have a nice break in World 3, with 2 easier bosses that we have to get through before we can get to Cala Maria. The first of these easy bosses is Werner Vermin. Werner's first phase consists of 2 attacks, both of which are pretty easy to dodge. For the attack where he throws trash at you, just smoke dash through it. For the bomb attack, make sure to accurately gauge the frequency of the bombs hitting the ground. Sometimes you'll need to jump twice in order to dodge both of them. Other times you'll need to dash in order to stay in the air a bit longer to jump the fire that they spawn on landing. Once you reach the second phase, deal as much damage as you can to Werner with the spread shot. He shouldn't stay around for long, and if you ever get uncomfortable, feel free to pop your invincibility to finish this phase. After Jerry finally gets eaten by Tom, the last phase begins. Tom is a background boss, so you already know what we're gonna do. Spam your spread EXs and dodge his insanely telegraphed attacks, and Werner Vermin is down, in my opinion the easiest boss in all of World 3. Before going to the next boss, make sure to switch back to the charge and roundabout combo. Now we can move on to Captain Brinybeard. Brinybeard is pretty easy, but he can sometimes crowd the arena if you aren't careful, which can very rarely lead to a hit. Luckily, he's never ended one of my real runs, but I have gotten hit on him in practice. In the first phase of this fight, the most important thing to keep your eye on is the barrel hanging at the top of the arena. Whenever it's looking up, it won't drop whenever you go under. When it's looking angrily at the dock, it'll drop when Cuphead walks under it. Generally, I like to make the barrel fall as much as possible by just continually baiting it down. As for the various marine life that Brinybeard can spawn, they're all pretty easy to deal with. If you see the shark, stick to the ship. If the squid spawns, kill it as fast as possible before your screen gets inked. Though, I seem to take it out pretty fast on this run and still got fully inked, so I don't really know how he works. If Brinybeard summons the dogfish, just jump over them. It's not worth sacrificing the DPS on the main target in order to take care of them. Also, note that Brinybeard does not have a contact hitbox. You can walk directly up to the ship and be completely fine. For the second phase, we have another new strategy. The intended way of playing this fight is to jump over the rotating bubbles of fire while damaging the ship, then either ducking or repeatedly parrying the large laser. But similar to Cagney's second phase all the way back in World 1, these fireballs have very specific times in their rotation patterns that we can duck under them. If you stand right in front of the leftmost pillars on the dock, you can completely duck the fire bubbles. Now, you might be wondering how we deal with the barrel if we can't move around. Well, there's another spot where you can duck the bubbles, right in between the 2 rightmost pillars. It just so happens that the distance between rotations for the bubbles is the exact same length as Cuphead's dash. So we can move between these 2 locations safely. But what about the laser attack? If you didn't know, when you dash in Cuphead, the hitbox is the exact same as the crouch hitbox, it just moves. But if you keep holding down during the duration of the dash, Cuphead never stands up, even though it looks like he does to dash. So if you set up in one of these 2 spots, then the barrel comes down, just look to the other side, dash, and you're completely okay. With that, we can take out Captain Brinybeard. With only 1 boss in World 3 and 2 gauntlet bosses left, we move on to Cala Maria. When I was first deciding the order of the gauntlet, it was actually kind of a toss-up between Calamaria and Dr. Cal for who was the harder playing boss, and it all comes down to how they can each use different kinds of RNG. Dr. Cal is a straight shot 1.5 chance. If you get a red gem to start, the fight is way harder. But Calamaria's RNG is way more complicated. Calamaria's first phase is by far the hardest part of the fight. She has 3 different types of enemies and 3 different types of environmental threats that she can spawn. Knowing how to deal with each and every combination of all of these attacks is crucial if you want to be able to no-hit this fight. Let's start with Calamaria's direct attacks. These come in the form of 2 different fish and her spawning ghost that can home in on you. The red fish simply clutters up the arena by firing a bunch of red projectiles. The yellow fish can be a bit more difficult, spitting out an eel that will track you until the fish itself leaves. The ghosts? Yeah, just move up when they're about to attack you and it shouldn't be a problem. In combination with these direct attacks, there are 3 ambient attacks that Calamaria can spawn. These consist of pufferfish, which just fly up in a random pattern. There's a seahorse, at least that's what I think it is. I'm not actually sure. You know what? Let's hold on. I've been here before. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. Oh my goodness gracious. Man, yeah, seahorse. Seahorse, yeah, it's a seahorse. I'm gonna go now. Yeah, the seahorse will push you up with water, and the turtle will shoot 3 mines that split into omnidirectional shrapnel. Out of the 9 possible combinations, 7 of them are pretty free, but 2 of the possible combinations can be really tough to deal with. The first of these is a yellowfish combined with a bad pufferfish pattern. In this clip here, I somehow managed to successfully dodge this, but this requires insanely tight plane movement. The other difficult pattern is again a yellow fish, this time combined with the turtle. It's really no surprise that these patterns are so difficult, as you have a slow-moving tracking style enemy along with a ton of small clutter projectiles. This creates sort of a minefield on the screen that you have to carefully maneuver around while keeping your speed to deal with the tracking enemy. But because this is only a 2 in 9 chance compared to Cal's 1 in 2, I decided to rank Cal as the harder plane boss. When you're fighting through Calamaria's first phase, it's very likely that you'll have a super. Calamaria has the highest base health in the entire game, weighing in at 2,500 HP. And with numerous opportunities to get parries in the first phase, super cards are relatively easy to obtain. But hold off on nuking her until the phase transitions. We're going to use our nuke in order to completely skip phase 2, a phase that would normally be a complete RNG nightmare. Once Calamaria gets bitten by the eels, goodness gracious, line yourself up with her hand. Now, once she fully transforms, watch her hands. Calamaria will do her first freeze attack after moving her hands 4 times or 6 times depending on RNG. So count 1, 2, 1, 2, then shrink and move up, dodging the freeze attack. From here, keep shooting Calamaria until the eels begin to attack. Then nuke her, getting rid of all of the eels and hopefully ending the phase before she has a chance to freeze you again. For Calamaria's last phase, there are 2 strategies that you can go for here. You see, Calamaria's freeze hitbox doesn't actually appear until the projectile is moved for a bit. So if you camp right in front of Calamaria, you'll actually never get frozen and can just dodge vertically. Though I was never a fan of using this strategy, and honestly just preferred to play the phase normally. My general strategy was just to dash past any obstacles as soon as I could in case I got frozen, and I never seemed to have any problems with this boss. With Calamaria completed, we've officially taken out all 3 worlds in Cuphead. All that's left now is Inkwell Hell. Now, before we get into the last section of this video, I want to talk about the story behind this challenge. One of my favorite parts about making these videos is the narrative, and talking to you guys about how I mentally, physically, and skill-wise overcame whatever challenge that I was doing. Usually, this involves the Tree of Life and the motorcycle, but we're gonna stay inside for this one. This was probably the challenge that I underestimated the most going into it. When I first went into this challenge, I didn't have too much experience in the game. I had 9 hours on it, a 200% save file for the main game, and I had done a permadeath run. And I really didn't realize how much worse no hit is than no death.
Do shit like this. Get as many runs in as I can. I'd really like to be editing this video in like a week or 2, because editing takes like 2 weeks, so at best this video is getting out in like 2 weeks.
Typically, when I do a challenge for this channel, it takes me about 3 days to a week at most. But this challenge literally followed me through 3 different real-life setups. I had the idea to start this challenge all the way back in February. I knew that if I live streamed my experience with it, that it would cure the boredom of playing the game over and over and over again. So I streamed and streamed and streamed. After 11 total Cuphead streams, I realized that this really wasn't working out. At one point, I had went completely silent and turned off the music of the game. And I was just seething with anger, having to turn on Cuphead again and do more no-hit runs. What the f- What the f- What the f- is wrong with you? And for the first time ever, I actually gave up on a challenge. At this point, I was midway through my freshman year of college, and I didn't really have the time for Cuphead no-hit runs if I wanted to keep uploading videos at a rate that was even close to reasonable. I was looking at the future of this channel, and I kind of realized that people didn't seem to like Cuphead videos nearly as much as FNAF content. So I went all in with FNAF, and I definitely don't regret that. I still want FNAF to be the main focus of this channel, and I love making FNAF content. But in the back of my mind, it still bothered me that I had never completed Cuphead no-hit. It's kind of my thing that I don't drop challenges, like, ever. And then I remembered something. I remembered why I had to do this. A lot of you watching this video probably found my channel through a challenge video, or maybe one of my original AI breakdowns on the main games. But do you know what kicked off this channel? Sure, FNAF made the channel into what it is today, but my first ever video was beating Cuphead without ever dying throughout the whole game. And as I sat here, contemplating if I should pick up this challenge again, I realized that it's almost been a year since that video, and oh my god, a year since the start of this channel. It was at this point that I was set, going in with a new mentality of do or die. I had to get this video made for the 1-year anniversary of the channel. This channel was kicked off by beating Cuphead without dying, and a year later, we're gonna come back and beat it without getting hit. Since the streaming days of this challenge, I've had a lot of mental training from the numerous FNAF challenges I had done, each providing a bonus that I added to my overall skill set. But the most important bonus I got from some of these challenges was nerve control, specifically Rat and Cat All challenges on the 3.0.0 version and the 6-hour FNAF challenge. Playing FNAF 1 420 for 6 hours was so miserable, and it built up my endurance so high that almost any challenge in any game was more enjoyable. And Rat and Cat All challenges taught me how to keep my body under control when I was nervous. And this really showed. The day I picked the game back up, after not playing for around 4 months, I instantly got a run all the way to Phantom Express, taking a hit to the unfortunate enemy placement on the conductor. I don't know how skill had transferred from FNAF to Cuphead. They're completely different games. Maybe it was just that I had taken a long break, but I knew that I was finally ready to end this challenge. Let's move on to our final bosses in this game, King Dice and the Devil. King Dice is a very unique boss in Cuphead in that he isn't really a standalone boss, more of a collection of mini-bosses. King Dice has 9 mini-bosses total, but you only have to fight 3 of them if you're able to hit the die with enough precision. Choosing which bosses to fight in order to pass King Dice is crucial. Because of the way the board is designed, you'll have to fight 1 boss from the range of 1 to 3, 1 from 4 to 6, and 1 from 7 to 9. In the range of 1 to 3, I knew to immediately rule out number 1. The alcohol boss is easily the most complicated out of the 3, the longest and the most reaction-based. This leaves the poker chips and the cigar. I ultimately ended up just choosing the cigar because I had more experience with him. For the range of 4 to 6, we have the dominoes, the magic rabbit, and the skeleton horse. I immediately eliminated the skeleton horse, easily the hardest out of these 3 bosses. Then, when choosing between the magic rabbit and the dominoes, I ultimately chose the dominoes. The magic rabbit is super easy with the smoke bomb, but for whatever reason, I didn't trust myself when he did the balloon attack from above. And in the end, I think the dominoes were more consistent. For the last range of 7 to 9, this one is an easy pick. First of all, we are not fighting the monkey. The monkey? The monkey. This dude is easily the hardest and longest King Dice mini-boss. Instead, I chose to fight the roulette. By just smoke dashing through her every time she moves across the arena and using the charge shot, all of her difficulty is removed. So I now had a set order of 3, 4, 7. I went into the King Dice fight expecting to mop the floor with him. After all, he's not a gauntlet boss, so this shouldn't really be a problem. I don't know if I can even explain this one, honestly. I mean, I wasn't nervous. If I had to guess why this happened, it might have been because I was practicing this boss on Expert beforehand, then I got used to the timings for Expert, so when I went back to regular, the projectiles were moving super slow and kind of caught me off guard. Well, in that case, we're going with the poker chips from now on. 2, 4, 7 seemed to be a much better order, and after getting to King Dice for the second time, it wasn't much of a problem. Now, King Dice himself is definitely the hardest mini-boss out of his whole crew. Basically, you have to repeatedly parry the pink cards that he spawns in order to not get hit. Normally, you'd have to do this about 4 to 5 times before beating the fight. But we, of course, have a strategy. When you're about to roll the dice to reach the end of the roulette, charge a charge shot. King Dice's hitbox becomes active the moment the roulette is finished rolling, so pre-fire a charge shot, then charge another one. You want to hit King Dice with 2 charge shots, then switch to spread and hold down the fire button. Now parry the first cycle of cards. Keep spamming dice with spread shot, then once the second volley of cards comes, jump, dash, and mash B to pop your invincibility. Now just keep jumping with spread shot and the fight should be over before Dice has a chance to spawn any more cards. Now it's finally time to move on to our final boss, and the last standing member of the gauntlet. It's time to fight the devil. I have more hours in this fight than almost every other boss in the game combined, so here's the rundown on the basic devil strategy. Like a lot of the other strategies I've talked about, my strategy for the devil uses phase manipulation, but it's a lot harder to pull off than some of the other bosses. Basically, this strategy can almost completely skip the 3rd and 4th phase if done properly, but makes the 1st and 2nd phase a bit harder. When going into the fight, we're going to want to equip the tried and true spread and charge. The first phase of this fight is probably the most challenging. Use the charge shot as your primary source of damage here, and make sure that you count your charge shots. There are a few attacks that you have to watch out for here. The first one is the goat slam. If the devil makes a sheep noise and turns his horns into rams, he's going to slam the entire floor of the arena. Make sure to either jump and dash, or jump and use a super to stall out the attack before landing. For any attack where the devil spawns projectiles, I would always recommend parrying the pink projectile out of the bunch. Not for more super cards, but just to clear the arena of the cluttered mess. This is especially useful in the circle fire attack and the bubble attack. Also, make sure to keep a watchful eye on the smaller devils that are constantly running across the arena, especially if the devil is doing his Chinese dragon attack. Always make sure that you're never caught off guard and have a mental note of when and where these smaller devils are coming from. Once you're past the first phase, it's time for phase 2. This phase is the easiest of the 4. The only tip that I can really give here is how the hitboxes work. The game attaches the actual hitboxes to the devil's pupils, not his whole eye. I hope you haven't lost count of how many charge shots you've hit because it matters now. Basically, we want to have as much transition time between phases 2 and 3 as possible. But how do we do this? Well, the devil can actually only start phase 3 once all of his animations from phase 2 are concluded. He only has 2 attacks in phase 2, one where he spawns an axe, and another where he spawns a bomb from his ear. Out of these 2 animations, the bomb one is longer, so we're going to use this in our strategy. In order to enter phase 3, the devil needs to take 1,235 damage total. Converting that into our unit of measurement gives us 26.83 charge shots. So if you've only used charge shots to damage the devil, he'll enter phase 3 on the 27th charge shot. If you used one super to stall in the air in phase 1, you're still going to go by 27 charge shots, but if you used more than one, it'll be the 26th charge shot. Now, wait until the devil is just about to start a bomb animation and shoot your last charge shot. This will stall the devil in this sort of limbo state between phases 2 and 3. He can't start spawning enemies from phase 3 in until the animation from phase 2 is done, even though it isn't actually currently active. This gets us a staggering 6 free charge shots, equating to 276 damage total. At this point, the devil will spawn in the fat purple demons on either side. Charge shots will take these guys out in one shot. Do not let them clutter the arena and take them out immediately. He'll always spawn the left one first, so take it out. Shoot the devil with a charge shot once, then take out the right one. Now, switch to spread and take out the mini enemies that spawn from the devil's head. From here, the fight is pretty much over. Once phase 4 begins and the devil starts crying, you're free to pop your invincibility and completely skip the last phase. And that covers the strategy for all of Cuphead without getting hit. Now, you already know, we gotta do the classic The Bones 5 ending montage. But this time, it's a little special. You see, back in the OG days, I had a trademark song. You're probably thinking of this song. But before, it was this. I have a lot of artistically gifted fans, both in the field of music and drawing, so I reached out to Nocticry, one of my first subscribers, to create a remix of the OG The Bones 5 montage song for this video. Go subscribe to their YouTube and follow the SoundCloud. Thank you so much to Nocticry for making this remix. And thank you all for 100,000 subscribers. I started this channel 1 year ago by beating Cuphead without dying, with the eventual goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers. And now, 1 year later, with 100,000 subscribers, I present to you beating Cuphead without getting hit.
Motherfucker! Yeah! Yeah! Let's go! Yeah! 55 hours!
Cuphead, full game, no hit. Oh. Oh.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This has been one of my hardest projects ever, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you want to see more Cuphead on this channel, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If this video does well, I might do a 100% no-hit run, including DLC. I think this video is the perfect example of how far we've come as a community. If you want to see for yourself, you can actually go back and watch the Cuphead no death video after this one. It's a little embarrassing, but it's always good to look back to where we started. With that, I do want to remind you all of the YouTube streaming schedule I currently have planned. I'm not sure if I'll do this before or after this video is released, but I'll be doing a 50/20 no death coin stream next. And after that, I'll actually be having some fun for once by playing my favorite game of all time, Super Mario Galaxy 2, to 100% completion all in one stream. This will likely be a 15 to 16 hour stream, and I think it'll be a blast. So if you're looking forward to that, make sure to stay tuned. With that said, thank you again so much for watching this video. Peace.